Hello and welcome to Greeting Star. Today we're going to be making a Christmas card using a die, an ornament die, and you can see here that I've chosen to use some foil papers. And this is what the card, one of the cards will look like. I'm using just regular, this is dollar store foil in different colors. It's not the foil that you put through the laminator, so it's just regular foil paper. And also we'll be using these tools to help us with the little tiny pieces that come out of the dies. And on the back of the die here, this is the front of the die. You can see the design, the ornament of the design. And these are really helpful tools to get those little pieces out and remove those. So this is the name of the die. We're using Basilica Ornament from Poppy Stamps. It's a craft die. It's a still die, and you can order that at poppystamps.com. We're also going to be using some double-sided adhesive to make it a little bit easier for us to adhere it to our card, and I'm going to be layering one color on top of another, so that makes it a lot easier. I'm also using some cards that I purchased at Michael's. They're already pre-folded and cut, which makes it a little bit easier, plus they're colored, so I don't have to worry about coloring it myself with dye inks or anything like that, or distress inks. So here is the double-sided adhesive, and you can see this is it. The one that I have comes in sheets of 8.5 by 11, so this is one that I had used and trimmed before. So I'm just going to peel away the backing, that's that white portion, and the sticky parts right here, you can still see a little bit of leftover foil from a previous use. So I'm just going to lay this down. And one of the things when I'm doing this is you're always going to have some little bubbles there, but there's a really easy way to get rid of it. Of course, you can try to smooth it a little bit with your hand, but just take an old gift card or an old credit card, and then I'm taking that backing and I'm just rubbing the card like that. And on hindsight, I would actually flip it over and put a layer of protection for the foil so the foil doesn't get any scuffs or scratches in it. Also, I would use that white backing and flip it over so that the shiny part was on the bottom, so that way the paper part didn't stick. As you can see, that's what happened there when I pulled it off. Now what I'm going to do is just layer this back over it, and then I'm going to trim it so that I can try to reuse and save some of the double-sided adhesive that I have here, because it can be expensive. So I'm just using little bits and pieces that I have left over. So this is a trimmer by Fiskars, and you can see there's a little wire there, and that's kind of a really great guide because it shows you exactly where that blade is going to cut. So then as long as you line up your paper with that metal wire, you know exactly where your cut's going to be. So now you can see here that I have this little thin piece that I can reuse on some other, maybe with a word die cut or something, or a small die cut. So here is the ornament die cut, and you definitely want to lay it down on the foil side, not on the yellow side. At least with this particular dollar store paper, I don't know if you have a different kind of foil paper or cardstock, but I found that if I'm using the double-sided adhesive, I want to put it on the foil side, not the yellow side. Now this is where this wonderful tool comes in handy. This is I believe a We Are Memory Keepers tool. It just helps me slide underneath, and I can get this die cut out really easily without having any trouble at all. And this silver portion die, that's the one that's going to be on the bottom. And another thing that I wanted to point out was do not go from the top where all those little intricate pieces are. So I come from the bottom to the top, and pretty much almost always all the little pieces stayed in. Now if you do have it happen that one of those little pieces doesn't stay in and it sticks in the die, I'm going to show you how to get that out and leave it on the actual die cut. So I just layer it back on there and then make sure it's nice and straight, and then I try to press it down with my finger a little bit and see if that helps. You can see that it doesn't, it's still stuck in the die. So I'm just going to flip it over and just barely press. I don't want to press too much because I don't want it popping out. I want it to stay with the die. So that worked. Now all the little pieces are there, and that's exactly what I want because this is going to be the bottom layer. So I want everything there. I don't want anything removed from it. I'm just burnishing those with my finger to help them stay down. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this other die cut, this blue one, and I'm going to peel it off so that I can stick it down to the silver. Now what you want to do is peel from the side that doesn't have those little tiny circles, because I want to try to it's just easier to do it that way. And I don't actually need those little pieces, the inserts. I'm going to take all of those out because I only want sort of the outline of the ornament to go on top of the silver, and I want the silver details to show through, so that way you get a two-color ornament, both blue and silver. So in a moment you can see I'm just peeling off the main piece, and now I'm going to take off those little pieces. And it's funny, the more you work with this, the easier it gets to peel off. At first it's a real hassle, and actually I decided not to peel it off because I had an idea that I might want to use those pieces in another card, perhaps as sort of like a decoration on a Christmas tree or something like that. So I just decided to leave the yellow backing on it so that I could go ahead and use it on a different card. However, those little dots can be really funny and tricky. So I have a tip for you. You can use that white, either just if you don't want these little and you're going to discard those little dots, you can use a piece of paper to stick them down to. If you think you might want to use them, it's really hard to get them out and keep that yellow backing on them. So I would use the backing for the double-sided adhesive, the shiny side, and I would try to put them on top of that because they'll peel off really easy later and you can use them again. So that's really a cool way to do it. But what I've done here is this is just a regular piece of paper. But don't forget that cool tip with the double-sided adhesive backing sheet. Just make sure you're putting it on the shiny side. That way it'll come off again really easy. You can see these can sometimes be a little bit tedious to work with, but I definitely think it's worth the effort. It's a really cool look, the two-tone color ornament. There we go. All right, just a couple more left at the top there in the little circles. And as soon as those are off, I'm going to adhere this top layer to the bottom silver layer, and you'll be able to see all those little details come through the blue in a silver color. So that's why I have so many of those silver ones cut out, because I'm using multiple colors of the foil to go on top. So I did a blue and a silver, I did a purple and a silver, and I also did a gold background with a red on top. And I also played around, and I think if you look at the image from the beginning of the video, you'll see I did one where I didn't do a silver backing. I just used that top color and laid it over the card, and it looked really neat because the blue area of the card came through the areas that I used, that I pulled out. So here I am removing that final backing off of the silver one. And this is where you do want to be careful because you want to leave all those little pieces in. So this is what's going to take you the most time, because you have to be careful not to remove any of those little pieces, or put them back in later if they do come out. And that's where those tools at the beginning that I showed you come in really handy, because they have a sticky part on one of them that I used to pick up the tiny pieces and put them back where they go when they came out. So I also use this tool to remove that backing sheet. That's really helpful. So you can see here, I'm just trying to get the major piece off, but I still want to leave those little pieces inside there. I don't want those to come off. So I'm trying to be careful. And whenever it looks like one's about to come out, I try to go back and rub it with my finger to make sure it stays on. So there we go. All those little dots stayed in there. Isn't that lucky? So now I'm going to remove the backing sheet from those little pieces, but again, I still want to leave everything in there because that's the silver part that I want to show through to the front of the card. And I'm just using my nail to try to get it to come loose from the sticky part. And you'll never really be able to notice that this die is in pieces and parts once it's glued down to the sheet. It'll look like one whole piece. So there we go. Now I'm just going to try to remove those little yellow backing sheets off those dots. It's really hard to get it off of those little tiny dots. So I think what I decided to do instead is just use this is some Elmer's liquid craft glue. And I have to prime it at first to get it to come out. It's kind of like a ballpoint pen on the end of this. I'm just putting a couple of dabs on those yellow backing sheets to make sure that they stick down. And I actually think one of them came up onto the tip of the glue. But now I can be assured that all those pieces will stay on the card and the ornament for me. I'm just going to place that down towards the bottom left edge of this card. And now you can see that the silver shines through the blue and it looks like a two-color, two-toned ornament. Pretty cool. And I do decide to use just the edge of that sheet to create the string for the ornament. And so I'm just going to use my paper trimmer to slice off a thin little line of the silver foil to use as that string, which you can see I'm doing here. And that's what I love about this particular Fiskars paper trimmer, is you can see exactly where it's going to cut because of that metal string there in between the ruler. So here we go. This is what I'm going to use for the string on the ornament. Just peel off that backing. I think I have to trim it down because there's a piece at the bottom there that doesn't have that adhesive on it. Oh, I forgot to put the little cap on, and that I did not cut out of the foil with a double-sided adhesive, so I'm just adding some little dot runner glue dots here. Tape adhesive. They actually come out in little dots though. So I'm going to put those down. And after that's placed, then I'll add the silver string. What I love about that adhesive is if it gets anywhere you don't want it, all you have to do is rub on it with your finger and it beads up and it comes off very easily. It doesn't leave any residue or marks on your paper, so that's really nice. So here we go. I'm just making sure that that line is flush with the top of my ornament, pulling it taut to make sure that it lays down flat on my paper, and then rubbing my finger over it and trimming it with these tiny little scissors. I got these scissors at Fry's Electronics, and I don't even know what they're called, but they're awesome for little bitty things. I love them. Little micro scissors. So now I'm going to, you can see here I'm looking to see if there's a name on them, and I cannot find any type of brand or name, so I don't even know what they are, but they're really cool. And I'm using this paper clip, and I just hook it onto the side of my pen holder, and then that way it's always available for me. Alrighty, so now you have a nice shiny ornament on the front of your card, and I'm going to add a greeting to it. I'm going to be using a stamp set and my, this is the We Are Memory Keepers Precision Press stamping tool, and I'm going to heat emboss a silver greeting. It says, "Wishing you a Merry Christmas," and that's from a stamp set by Hero Arts, which I think I'll show you in a moment here. But right now, there it is. It's the Wishing You a Merry Christmas, and this is the Hero Arts stamp and cut set. It'll be down in the description. It'll be listed which die set it is. Now I'm using some Versamark, and that little pad that you see me using there on the card is going to prevent the embossing powder from sticking anywhere on the card that I don't want it. That just gets rid of the static electricity. So now I'm using the Versamark ink to ink up my greeting. I want to make sure I get a lot of it on there. And then I'm going to stamp it on the card. And the reason I'm using this precision press stamper is because I want to make sure that I really get a good coverage with this ink. And if I'm not satisfied, I could do it again and know that it would stamp exactly where I stamped it in the first place, and I wouldn't have any double images or anything, because it would be aligned perfectly. Okay, so now this is where I'm just using a piece of scratch paper behind this so that when I pour the embossing powder, this is silver embossing powder by Hampton Arts. I bought a set that had a bunch of different colors in tiny bottles. And you know, I find that's really all I need, because I don't use a lot, and then I can reuse this if I collect it on this scrap paper here, which is really nice. I never want to throw away any extra or leftover embossing powder. I'll just put it right back in the bottle and reuse it, which you'll see me do here in just a second. I just crease the bottom of it and then pour it right back in, and I can reuse it again and again. No waste. And now I'm going to use my Doris heat tool to heat emboss the greeting, just making sure it gets nice and hot, so that way when I add it, when I apply it to the card, it doesn't warp the card as much if it's nice and hot. The longer you hold it there waiting for it to get hot, the more of a chance the paper has to bend and fold. So if I do this, then it doesn't warp the card quite as much. Make sure your gun is nice and hot before you use it. Alrighty, so we're done with the front of the card. And for the inside of the card, I'm also going to use that same Hero Art stamp set, and I'm going to use the and a Happy New Year. And I want to match the color of the front of the card, so I check out two different colors that I have here, and I think I end up going with the dye ink, but this is what I'm going to put on the inside of it. It says, "And Happy New Year." So I'm just going to try to align that and make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'm going to get an acrylic block to stamp it. Need to clean that acrylic block. But I'm going to go ahead and go with this Memento ink, and I think you can see the name of it on there, but I will go ahead and put that down in the description below. So I'm just going to ink up this sentiment stamp here. And that's a dye ink, the Memento dye ink. I'm going to test it on a piece of paper because I want to make sure that I'm happy with the color, that I will like the color that it's going to be. I think it matches the front of the card nicely, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and use. So I'm just going to ink this up with this Memento dye ink here. And you can see that it's making some marks on the acrylic block. I want to wipe those up with a baby wipe to make sure that it doesn't come in contact with the inside of the card and make a mess. So I'm trying to be as neat as I can here, which is sometimes a challenge. So I'm just going to stamp this here. I like to press down for a little while and let the ink absorb just for a few seconds to make sure that that ink gets absorbed into the paper. So there is my finished card ready to send to somebody. Now I'm going to show you this other color. This is the green card with the gold and red ornament, and I'm using some more Memento dye ink to stamp the inside. So what I did is I made sure that all of my sentiments on the inside of the card match the color of the outside of the card. I thought that was a nice little touch. So I'm going to do that with each of those cards. So for the purple cards that I did, the inside is going to have a purple greeting as well, which I don't show in the video, but obviously, just to let you know, that's what I did. So here we go. And again, trying to clear off any of that stray ink mark so it doesn't make a mess on the inside of the card. Holding it down to let that ink get absorbed into the paper. And voila, there we go, we're done. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you could join me today. Please check out my blog at greetingstar.org or take a look at my ebook on amazon.com/author/greetingstar. The book is called Illustrated Card Making for Beginners, and it's full of lots of good information. Also makes a great Christmas gift. It's a digital download from Amazon. And I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.